you're here, you understand how climate change is a big disaster and how we really need carbon removal to try and fight it because we're going to manage it. And then, so one of the things that we understand is how important it is for innovations and other students being part of it. So the Carbon Removal Challenge is for university students, college students. They can register and submit innovative ideas, innovative projects. Then that will be evaluated, and we're gonna, they can go to the Carbon Unbound in May with mentoring and a lot of processes out to help them. So that's a little bit of how this works. So in September, the challenge is released in the Climate Week from New York. And then from September to March, there are different webinars such as this one. There are mentoring programs. And then in March, the registrations, sorry, in January, the registrations were closed. In March, there will be the final time for the applications. And then in April, the finalists will be announced, and there will be a panel of judges that are really qualified for the themes. And then in May, they're going to be presenting their work. And now I think, the key dates. So as I mentioned, the registration opens in September. The November, the mentorship program began. January, the registrations were there until January. So now it's finished. And the submissions projects are due to the 2nd of March. And then the finalists, as I mentioned, will be announcing in April. And then in May, there'll be the final showcase in New York City for the Carbon Unbound. So we have 34 teams signed up, and you can see there are different places of the world. So Kenya, US, India, Canada, China, Korea, which is very interesting. And I think you can show how much diversity and how much importance people are seeing in carbon removal and how much technology and new ideas, which is super important and super nice. Yeah. And also we have a crowdfunding. So please help the university students. So if you're a university student, you can share this with your family, companies, anyone, and we're going to be very pleased if they can help. And then the monthly webinar series, this is where it gets really good. So this one is the February one. We are having accelerating carbon removal startups. And March, that will be really amazing. And I'm going to talk about it after the webinar. Buying back the future, hot tips from leading carbon removal buyers. So it's going to be really nice as well. But this one is also amazing. So yeah, I think that was it from our side. So I'm going to start with the webinar, with the panelist discussion. So first of all, I'd like, not that you need an introduction, the three of you, but I'd like you to introduce yourselves a little bit and what your work is, what your accelerator program or venture studio does. So just to give a little bit of an idea for the people watching it. So Mica, can you start it, please?
Yeah, sure, happy to. So I'm Mica Taborga. I'm originally from Bolivia. I did a PhD in chemical engineering, and then I worked in oil and gas for about 7 years prior to joining Marble. In oil and gas, I really focused on scaling up technologies from lab to first-of-a-kind pilot demos, and both at Exxon and Repsol. And in both, I was working on director capture specifically. At Repsol, we were able to actually get a pilot running in Brazil, 300 tons per year, and it's actually operational now. And then I decided to shift gears a little bit more and have a wider impact, and that's why I joined Marble. It's a venture studio, and we create and help build climate startups and de-risk the startups that we have also. And we go from tech conceptualization all the way to spin out and support beyond the spin out phase. And pleasure to be here with Tito and Marian. So I'll let them talk also.
Marian, can you go, please?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Very excited to see 36 teams that have signed up, and also plenty of people here in the chat. Really, really cool. And I guess it's also relevant for the three of us because what we're essentially working on is the future CDR supply. So excited to see all of you coming up, joining that force. I am the co-founder of Remove. We are a nonprofit that runs accelerator programs for carbon removal startups. We started out in Europe. Since then, we have started programs in India, in Sub-Saharan Africa, and we'll soon launch one in LATAM as well. About 200 startups that we've supported so far. My background is as an entrepreneur. I've founded a solar company before. And yeah, we are very excited to be part of this.
And last but not least, Tito.
Hey everybody around the world. I saw different teams signed up, so that's really awesome. Great to be spending a bit of time with all of you. Even though I can't see you, but I'm seeing everybody's like names in the chats. That's super cool. If you haven't heard about AirMiners, we're best known for our accelerator program. We've had 227 carbon removal startups graduate. They've raised more than $250 million for every solution imaginable for carbon removal up till this point, until you came in and now you have something new you're working on. So super excited to hear about that. Yeah, and I mean, we're really aligned around how do we get to a stable climate and a thriving human civilization. That comes back to how to remove 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide by 2030 to be on track for 10 billion tons per year by 2050, which is all just from the IPCC. So that's yeah, really thrilled to be here with you all.
That's great. So I think one of the points that it's very interesting, and I think will be very important as well for who is watching, is understand how can you measure success in your accelerator in terms of like real world carbon removal impact. And as well for Mica, what is the difference between accelerator and venture studio? So Mica, I think you can start and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the way that we like to think about our model is where we really try to create companies from zero, and we have problem first approach. So we really try to explore areas within climate tech that haven't been underexplored, that we can develop a new solution that has the potential to scale and is differentiated enough that we think can have a huge upside. So in terms of the success, I think that's probably it, like understanding like a problem first approach that has the ability to scale. And as an example, we spun out Norma. It's a direct air capture company that is really doing well currently in building their first prototype. And the differentiator there is that they're using supercapacitors for regenerating the CO2. And that is unprecedented in the field. So for those that know enough about DAC, you would understand that this is the first one they're trying to use supercapacitors in the field.
Tito or Maria, if you open your mic as well, it's no problem.
Yeah, big up for Norma, also graduate of our program. And I think you see that again and again, that also between the three of us, we have teams that, you know, have been through all of our programs, given that, you know, it's hard enough to build a startup and then build it in a space like carbon removal. You can need any help you can get. I think the success metric or question for probably all of us three in carbon removal is difficult because eventually the metric is tons removed. But since we're early days and early stage, it is very hard to measure on that because, you know, a lot of you will be talking grams or kilograms, but certainly not tons or megatons, right? So that is only projected into the future. Now you can say, okay, let's talk about projected carbon removal tons into the future, but that is also a bit of a vanity metric. So I think for us, it's very much about ensuring that as many startups that get started in carbon removal survive to a point where the market is really ready to sustain them, right? There have been, I guess, happier days in carbon removal. So right now it would be a bit dishonest to talk about scaling. I think right now it's really about making sure that as many startups survive until the market is there. So for us, I think the core mission is to provide or to make sure there is supply resilience when we all demand it, right? And that goes through having supported as many startups as possible to survive until demand is there.
Yeah, just building on what everybody said, like in the sense of if you think about an accelerator, like I think for most of us, like I think for everybody, if you come back to like the core measure of success is like, did we actually help a team go faster and go further? Your time is your most precious thing as a startup founder at this stage, right? Were we like net additional to that, or was it like a subtraction on your time, right? That is when I think about like how we measure success. Long term, obviously, like how do we get to a stable climate? It really does come down to like the environment doesn't care if we thought about removing tons or if we almost removed tons. Like it's that there's tons of carbon dioxide in the air that didn't get either not emitted or removed, and so that's how we think about measuring success long term.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned a lot about, especially Maria, about like making the companies and the startups survive through the beginning and move forward until like the market grows, till there is more demand. So I think as well, it's very important as because of as the carbon removal challenges focus on students. So understand what are the common, let's say, technical or like business challenges that your participants face or have faced, and how do your program helps them? I think you already mentioned a lot about like helping them survive, but if you could also dive deeper in maybe other aspects in this one, it would be very nice. So yeah, Mahia, you can start.
Sure, but I think all of the three of us have probably a lot of things to talk about here. I want to come back to market immaturity, although it sounds like a broken record, but it I think has one immediate consequence, which is if you're a startup, especially in deep tech, and you rely on having cash to build the next pilot and then to build the next iteration, that requires you to fundraise. And investors typically want to see commercial traction. And if the market on the carbon removal side is not equipped to give you that commercial traction, you need to think early on about alternative revenue streams that you might be able to tap into. So thinking about what problems can your carbon removal solution solve that is not carbon removal and not generating credits, right? It's very obvious in things like agriculture, where either biochar or basalt or other enhanced weathering solutions provide agronomic benefits that by themselves are revenue worthy. But you can also think about other solutions, ocean alkalinity enhancement in wastewater treatment plants, everything that has to do with waste, and a lot more things. So I think our core job, or one of the key things we do with our startups, is to try to identify those alternative revenue streams and then develop value propositions that are very different from I sell a credit at 150 accredited by Isometric. A wastewater treatment plant that has a problem around the pH value of their wastewater does not care about that. They care about the problem that they have and whether you can solve it or
not. Tito?
Yeah, I totally second that, right? Like that is the key thing. If there's like one thing that you take from this, take what Marian just said. Yeah, again, like when you're talking to investors, when you're talking to your own team, maybe you're talking to carbon removal credit buyers, always have it in that context of this is like how your company grows in this phase really has to come from if you're doing wastewater treatment, if you're doing wildfire reduction, if you're doing like something that actually somebody else just wants to pay for because it's a good idea, because they need it rather, not because it's a good idea, and figure out how to remove carbon along the way.
Maybe the additional thing I would say to that is that I think from a technology de-risking standpoint, you really have to think about that roadmap. What are the milestones that you want to accomplish? And like Marian was kind of describing, based on the funding and the budget that you have, you will base those de-risking milestones. But you should also think about what are those critical path items that you want to de-risk first, that give you the highest value add to your startup and therefore give you the runway to keep going. And yeah, it's tough without the unit economics, and we understand that in CDR and a lot of the technologies out there, the unit economics don't work right now, and so having those secondary revenue streams are definitely critical for surviving through this period of time. But if you can even think about technologies where your unit economics work without policy incentives, then you're golden. But I totally understand that that's hard to achieve. So.
Yeah. No, but I think the three of you raised a very important point that is usually not the first thing that comes to mind when you start like a startup. You think, I want to save the planet, I want to remove carbon, but how do you sell this? How do you make this a product that can be profitable in the future? And so considering like, I don't know, students or early stage teams that are interested in this topic of carbon removal, what like would be a practical advice that you would give to them to build credibility and traction before or while applying to one of your accelerators?
So I can
Yeah.
speak to that one. I mean, one of the things I see with very, very early teams is, look, you've built something. Like you've maybe built a spreadsheet, maybe you've built an actual like thing on your table. You probably don't like it. You probably are like, look, like the thing I eventually want to make is this amazing freaking thing. The things that you've actually built are your credibility. That is it's incredible that if you've got an idea, great. If you've built a spreadsheet out of it, awesome. Make sure to like tell people about that spreadsheet. If you build like a weird thing that's on your desk, then talk about that. Make sure to like show pictures of it, show progress, because I think in terms of traction and credibility at that early stage, a lot of people have ideas and they have thoughts about how to do this, and your job is to differentiate yourself from that. And that you've built a spreadsheet is it's just factually that it's a major differentiator from somebody who's still at the idea stage. And if you've built a thing on your desk that's like gluey and duct tapey and doesn't actually work, that's still like another step ahead of. So if you're playing the credibility game, and that's how the game works at this stage. I often see startups that have like we go through their pitch deck and they don't have a picture of anything they've built. They've got like 3D renderings, which is great. Like if what you have is 3D renderings, fantastic. But then I'm like, have you built anything or something? And they're like, oh yeah, like we have these photos, but like, the thing doesn't actually work yet. And I'm like, okay, like that you've built this thing, put that in. And the first thing teams always do is they put it in their pitch deck, but it's like a postage stamp size. I'm like, no, like that is literally like the whole foundation of your credibility is that you've actually gone out and built something. You've like had the world come together to make parts or whatever. Maybe it's a spreadsheet. But yeah, like just make sure to just love that whatever stage of thing you've built, and make sure to present like the latest and greatest that you've built. Maybe just the latest, not even the greatest. Just like your definition of what greatest is probably like not working for you. So just like whatever the latest thing you've built is, take a photo of it and put that as like you're in your pitch deck.
I would second that. I think in early stage venture, typically people assessing your startups are looking for reasons to believe, right? And that is a reason to believe if you show that something exists in the real world. Another one would be, and I saw a lot of you, if not all of you, are connected to universities. Leverage that university connection, because that lends you credibility that you individually will not be able to sort of elude, right? Be that through having your professor sign a letter of support, right? Or be that through stressing that you've built this pilot in the lab of University X or Professor Y. And we've seen this up until the really, seed Series A stages, that the startups that continue to have strong ties to universities really, benefit from that strongly. Later on, it will allow you to be able to raise non-dilutive grants because you stick or you maintain that connection. But especially in the early days, just having not just a logo, but some closer ties, maybe an MOU with a professor or anything, that is another reason to believe for anyone that really wants you to succeed. I think all the three of us are looking at your pitch deck. Tito's looking for that picture of the latest. I'm looking for your university logo, right? We want to see that. We want to see you succeed.
And just to add to that, I would fully agree that I think having the right conversations with stakeholders is critical as you build like from a tech to a value proposition to a business. And you have different stakeholders, right? Like your professor is probably the tech validation one or the core science one. You then need engineering, then you need commercial traction, then you need partners to develop your proof of concept, etc. And I think the more you get out there, talk to people and really understand what are those problems that you're solving for, the clearer that vision will be and the better your pitch decks and etc. will come and the work that you do behind the scenes to make that happen, right? And together with that, I would say like in every single area, whether it's tech or commercial, etc., you should try to think about advisors. And I think that's what Marian was describing, like with a professor, I agree. But I think that there's more advisors that you should start to think about early on to add to your teams.
So I really like the phrase from Marian saying like a reason to believe, because I think in the end, what we're all trying, I mean, we have a reason to believe because we want to make this happen. And then if you have a startup, you're like, okay, really believe in this, and I want you to believe in this as well. I think that's a little bit of what you're saying. And then, so when you're evaluating the startups, then that you want to find and be convinced of the reason to believe. So what are the top three qualities, let's say, or indicators you look for that signal, a team or technology is ready for an acceleration? So let's say that will give this like, okay, they're ready to go and I really believe in them. Yeah, Mica?
Sure, I can start. So Marvel's model is a little different, where we really
Yeah.
go from idea conceptualization all the way to take the risking to spin out. But what I would say in general that is critical is that differentiator for the tech itself. They have clear traction and have a very good narrative of why now is relevant and still relevant, especially for CDR. Like, why would a new solution doing another DAC or biochar, whatever it is that you're doing, is relevant and new and can really become breakthrough. The other piece, I think, is having a clear de-risking plan with all the critical risk on the commercial, on the technical side of things. And then the other biggest piece, which is probably the main reason why companies fail eventually, is because of the team. So really thinking early on who is the co-founders in your team to go through this with you, because startups are roller coasters and you should be aware of that. So.
Tito?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, going back to like, this is what I often tell teams is like, the way we built our program goes back to like, can we help you, right? So effectively, like what we're looking for is like, is there something we can do to help this team right now? Or would they be better off like doing something else right now or something else, right? The things that we're really good at is we're really good at helping you figure out how to raise money from investors. So if you need to do that, great, especially like at a stage where you're raising about $1 million or $2 million. So that's like, that is a reason to come check out what AirMiners is up to. We're also really good at the carbon removal credit sales side of things. That's like not working as well as I would like right now. And we're really good at like understanding how that works and kind of ground truthing what's actually happening there. Those are the two things that we're really good at helping you with, the things we can help you with. Again, I would make sure when you think about an accelerator program, these things aren't, in your way or things that you have to get there first and then go do your thing. These are things that like, if you ever play Super Mario Kart, like maybe these things can be like the speed booster things for you, possibly, right? Like think of it like that. So that's my thoughts on what we do.
To add to Mica, I think one is we look for whether you've done a lot with little, especially in the early days, right? Where have you gotten to? That sort of shows a bit resilience and grit. And I think at the same time, we would like to see some, I guess, intellectual humility in being very much aware of where you are and that what's still ahead of you, which risk you can identify, and not to oversell your ability to solve them, but just being very honest about the challenges ahead. I think that typically distinguishes good teams from great teams, that they have understood not just the opportunity, but also the risks inherent and how to solve for that. I actually have a question for Mica because it might be relevant. As you were saying, it is great to get LOIs from various stakeholders, right? And I mean, you were on the other side. You were working for the big corporates. And I imagine if I'm now a student team, I'm trying to get an LOI from Mica when she was still at the oil and gas at Repsol, what would I need to do to able to do that?
That's a very good point. And actually, we have signed several LOIs, especially if it helps teams that we believe in their technologies to get into certain programs to help them accelerate, etc. And I think really is the tech differentiator that comes first above everything, where there is a clear defensibility that you have a new tech that can be breakthrough. And not just by claims, but actually showing and that goes to Tito. Also what he was saying, like if you have built something, if you have a real model behind that describes what is the innovation that you've done and why you believe, and there is strong evidence and conviction that indeed this can be true, then we would do that analysis in-house, take a look and see how potential that is, etc. And then if there is enough conviction and you convince us that this is worth pursuing, then we are, by corporates in general, are pretty open to doing those things because we need more innovation in this space in particular. So absolutely.
And talking about a little bit about risk and innovation, I think you mentioned, I think one of the words that came the most here is risk. Because of course, when you're building something new, there is always the risk and the resilience that is needed. So thinking here as if you could make us help us understand a little bit more, how can you balance supporting, let's say, high risk, high reward innovations with others that are closer to deployment or scalability? Yeah, Mica, you can go first.
Yeah, I would say it comes back to what I said earlier. I think we can pick any date we want, whether it's 2030, when it's 2035, whether it's 2028, right? When significant demand hits, the supply needs to be there. And for it to be there, we need to build an ecosystem of CR suppliers that is resilient. And I think we can only get there if we have a portfolio of pathways as well as maturities, right? Because just because a startup might be further along the path does not mean that it will be the one delivering the megatons we need from that pathway. So in our program, and I think I speak for the three of us, we have a mix of startups that are maybe earlier stage and higher risks, and ones that are maybe more close to deployment. So a bit, if you want, lower risk. And I think it's very important to have both from the supply resilience angle, but also because there is initial demand on the market already right now. We need to make sure that those market signals are being met. So having near deployment, lower risk startups and suppliers out there is very, very important to just show that the market is growing. Well, I think the higher risk ones create optionality in a sense, right? We are for sure supporting pathways that might not materialize, and that's okay. But at least we've looked at it and we've invalidated it. So I think that's also part of the role that we in early stage startups have, is to make sure that in principle, all ideas that have some merit are being looked at. And then as an ecosystem, we can see whether there's merit to them or not. But it would have been a pity if 2040, we look back and said, oh, if only we'd looked at it, but now it's too late.
Mm-hmm. Tito or Mica, yeah, please.
Maybe just the other way to think about risk is like the potential it has. And so how do you measure the potential? I think a lot on scale up. So there's a lot of solutions out there in CDR that scientifically could be interesting, but there's a lot of challenges to actually scale those technologies forward because of many limitations, right? And so the one thing, if you can take away from me today, is really think about early on how this would scale and what are the enablers for that to happen. And if it's just costs, then maybe through learning rates, etc., you can get there. But if there are other enablers from even other industries that would unlock that, and having that visibility on when that would happen, it's important to think through early on.
Yeah, I'll just say I like what everybody said. And I think when I'm thinking about this group of student teams, I mean, we have it's 429 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere today, right? Like we have not figured out how to remove carbon dioxide at scale. We have not proven things that can be at scale yet. Like it is entirely possible that it's 2050, we're looking back and like, oh my gosh, like the thing that actually leapfrogged everything and changed all the thinking was the thing that you're working on, right? So in terms of high risk, like I encourage you to, I like Marian's point about like figure out what the risk is, or maybe Mica said that. Somebody said like figure out what the risk is that you're taking on, and just be aware of it, and speak about it.
Yeah, so yeah, no, I loved your answers, and I think they're very complementary. And I think Mica mentioned before a little bit about policy, and Marian, I think you talked a lot about the market and the demand. So I wanted to understand, how is the current policy and market, let's say, situation for incentives? And how do you think this can shape the opportunities and the limitations for those startups? And how do you see this in the future?
I can probably just get like the way I would start is like look at, if you're talking to anybody that started a company in like 2022 in carbon removal, they were operating in a very different world. The world then was carbon removal is this new up and coming thing, and we think the trajectory is going to be going like this. And so that was like the story that they were tapped into. Now the story is we thought it'd be going like this, but now it doesn't. We're not totally sure. There's actually some signs that it's not going to go like that. Maybe it will go like that. And so just as like a preface to what everybody else says, just that is the story that you're working within.
Mm-hmm.
It heavily depends on the geography you're active in, and or you are planning to deploy in. I mean, given that you are early days, I think in all honesty, policy is not something that you should be particularly working on. I think you have bigger risks to de-risk or to hypothesis to validate or invalidate. Once you really hit the market or are able to go to the market, the policy landscape will have changed 180. We've seen how quickly that can happen in some geographies around the world. So keep up to date, of course, because you need to be able to talk about it in a sort of educated, intelligent way to investors. But really, I think you have bigger fish to fry at this point. That being said, of course, the long game for carbon removal is one that is not based on voluntary markets, but on compliance or governmental markets. So we clearly rely on policy regimes to change. Currently, unfortunately, that is not the case, and which puts us in the predicament that we're in. But there have been signs, again, in some geographies more than others, that this will eventually change. And quite frankly, I think from a timeline perspective, you being still quite early days actually works in your favor, because if I was a Series A carbon removal company right now, looking ahead to a potential European trading system integration of removals in 2031, that is still 5 years of runway that I somehow need to finance, right? For you, this might be one funding round, right? Or a large grant and a deployment. So actually, this might work in your favor. Which I think is also one thing that I wanted to say in general, because it's a question that I sometimes get when people point me towards, okay, there are so many carbon removal companies already out there, right? Why would you with Remove support more, and why would anyone found a company right now? I think actually, because of the supply resilience and because of the timelines, right now is a golden time to found a carbon removal company. Because once you hit the market, it will be a lot more mature, and the macroeconomic environment should also have changed quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But while you're going through this, really don't think about policy as your golden ticket to scale, right? I think you really, if at all, and today, I mean, it's hard to do that, but to the extent that you can really think about unit economics and how do you design your process or a mechanical apparatus so you have the lowest cost opportunity possibility, and also like how do you integrate the other piece that from an OpEx standpoint that startups don't do enough is thinking through how to integrate in the various value chains that you're in to tap into the resources so that you can really be as economical as possible on both CapEx and OpEx, because ultimately that will be critical for you to scale. So
no, because I was just thinking here about what the three of you said, and coming back to the fact that you also mentioned that you need to build a story to give another, let's say another, how do you call it, benefit apart from carbon removals. So the investors, they'll see and say, okay, there is a benefit for, let's say, now as well, not just for the carbon removal in like 10, 15 years. do you have any, let's say, partnerships programs or partnerships between, as Marian already asked Mica, between like large industries or academia with startups that were in your programs on your venture studios? Do you have any examples? And then how did it work? Why did it work?
Yeah, happy to discuss that a little more. I think like having that corporate or industry firsthand experience and first eye of understanding on the problems that they currently have and what are really the pain points is critical. To better think about the solutions that you develop for those particular customers, let's say. And they can also be very good partners for doing proof of concept. So at Repsol, they had several programs where you can do a proof of concept together with them at a given site location. And so I think that even though in the VC world, people seem to suggest that you shouldn't go talk to corporates until you're later on in the game, I do believe that having corporates by your side is, especially in CDR, and more the hardware-based solutions, I think it really adds a lot to the de-risking from a capex and capital standpoint that I think is worthwhile considering early on. So. But I come from that industry, so I may be biased. I don't know what Tito and Marian think about this.
Go for it, Tito.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I think part of the reason that the general view is like avoid these large partnerships is because at times startup founders seem to think that this is like the promised land, right? If we get this partnership, then it'd be great. And it probably would be, but I think the thing that we do a ton of training around is when you're talking to potential customers, to potential partners, you're not pitching your idea. You're working to understand what is it that's actually important to the person that you're talking to in the next 6 months. Because if they come, like, asking that question will get you actually information about whether there's the possibility of a real like partnership there, a real project there that can move on the timeline that you need it to move on. Startups move on like a day timeline, week, months, right? You're not talking about year timeline. So if you go to a corporate and they say, they start talking about their 10-year goals, that's not useful for you as a startup. They talk about there is this thing we need to get accomplished in the next 3 months or I get fired. That is an excellent project that if you can help with that in some way, if you can hook your project into that somehow, then that's awesome. So we do a ton of training around having teams ask questions about what's actually important, what's not working super well, what are you looking to solve? That is your job as a startup founder, is to, if somebody comes in and says like, gosh, we'd love to work with you on a big partnership, that you actually do the work to understand how not real necessarily is that, but how relevant is that? How much follow through? How quickly are they going to move, right? If something's a real problem, somebody will move on it. If something is not a real problem, they will talk to you for 6 months telling you that it's a problem. So make like that your job is to dial in and figure out and find where are the problems, then where are the problems that you can help. If you can help solve those, great. But your primary conversations should be understanding what their problems are and making sure that you understand what those are.
Word.
Loved it. So those are my questions. Thank you so much for all the discussions, all the answers, comments, suggestions. I'll now pass to Sue for our Q&A.
Yes, so thank you very much. This has been fascinating. And we've gotten a few questions from our audience members. Please keep them coming in. I'll start off with a question from Raul Mulambo, who I believe said in the chat that he's from Mozambique. And he asked, what role do you see for emerging economies in the CDR value chain as project hosts, technology adopters, or capital partners? Maybe I'll start with Marian, since you are growing your organization into emerging markets.
Sure. A massive role for emerging economies. We will not get to 10, 15 gigatons of carbon removal without a massive supply of those removed tons coming from emerging economies. So very, very clearly. Now the question, of course, is how will we do this, and what have we learned from the oil and gas days, right? Will this remain or become another extractive industry where the main value remains within the global north, or if we manage to retain a lot of that value being created locally? I think that clearly the second one is what we prefer, and that's why we run the programs there locally to build that capacity, which, by the way, is not just for climate equity reasons, but also because every geography, and that is true for Europe, that's true for the US, but also that's true for Mozambique, India, Indonesia, or Paraguay, has its idiosyncrasies, right? So if I went in there as a naive global North European person, I would have trouble deploying a pyrolysis unit, let alone running it and selling those credits. So just from a pure likelihood of success perspective, it is paramount that local entrepreneurs develop and deploy those solutions. Now, the question is, will the capital come from those emerging economies? I think that's unfortunately a question mark, because there's just less capital available for entrepreneurs and just in general. So I'm afraid, not even afraid, but I'm very conscious about the fact that a lot of the capital that is needed for those deployments will likely still come from the established economies going forward for the time being.
Tito and Mica, do you have anything to add about emerging economies?
Yeah, totally. Hey, Raul, great to hear from you. I'm thinking about your friends up a little bit north in Kenya. I highly encourage you, if you haven't heard about already, the Great Carbon Valley Initiative, this idea of creating direct air capture machines, carbon dioxide removal storage, underground storage. I'm going to give you a couple links here, but that when I think about, oops, maybe I answered the wrong guy. Oh no, it went away. Great. Check out those links. Watch there's a TED talk around it. I encourage you to check that out and see. I mean, again, it goes back to like you have this opportunity to discover what that role can be. We've got lots of carbon dioxide in the air, lots more going in every day, and we're out to figure out how do we actually balance it out. And so I think that the work going on in the Great Carbon Valley is really inspirational and a playbook for how this can work.
Great. Mica, did you have anything to add?
The only additional thing I think the global south and like places like Brazil or Kenya have is the renewable infrastructure that they have, and also Kenya for the CO2 storage. So definitely they will they will have a big role when it comes to CDR and carbon removal. So I do think that there's huge opportunities there, but probably the areas where they're going to develop most is where that infrastructure already exists, or there's big investments to make that happen. So just consider that as you're thinking through it.
Yes, and as Bea mentioned at the top of the program, we have several teams signed up from Kenya, and we have teams from India this year as well. We don't have any from Brazil yet, but I'm looking forward to I want to see, multiple teams from Brazil next year. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. Okay, so we had a couple other questions. One was, are you ensuring that these the companies, the startups that come to you are taking into account full life cycle emissions of their processes, and is that something that you help them with, or require them to have, so that they have trustworthy data?
As part of our program, we do have sessions on LCA with LCA experts that both in a larger group outline how a proper LCA would be done, and then afterwards the startups meet one-on-one with the experts to address their individual questions. So yeah, very much so. Depending on what types of LCA you are doing, these things obviously need to be considered. Not only because, or also because the standards that exist, for instance, for the DAC and geologic storage the CCS Plus initiative and Pure have a standard that clearly requires you to do a full life cycle, including your sorbents.
Okay. Any other comments on that? All right.
Yeah, I'd say we help with that. It's important. I'd say, like, for your own thinking, if part of the reason that you started this company is you want to reverse climate change, then you want to know what your life cycle assessment is, right? It's not this thing that's imposed. It's not this thing that somebody else is telling you to do. You want to know that your process is carbon negative. We had a team in our program that they worked with us. They met the people who knew how to do it, and they came back and they're like, "Gosh, we just can't make the life cycle assessment work. So we're going to do something different." So they came up with a different company to work on. That's how important it was to them that overall their company was able to remove carbon from the sky.
Yeah. Well, it's great to hear that it's really embedded as part of the process of what everyone needs to do. I think that's one of the first criticisms that the public has is, is it really removing carbon on net? So, okay, so we also got some questions around carbon utilization, and are you seeing a lot of the startups that you work with doing things like doing direct air capture to fuels, for example, or is most of it not with a utilization component and they need a storage solution? What are your thoughts on that?
On our end, since we function a little bit different, it's not only carbon removals, but having a climate angle. We did look indeed in carbon utilization. We actually spun out a company called Airlium that currently is demonstrating on a pilot scale their technology where they do direct air capture and CO2 to methanol in one single reactor with two different sites that make that chemistry work. So the absorption and then the conversion. So I do think that, like I think Marianne was saying, I think we need a variety of solutions, both in CDR and utilization for getting to net zero. So both definitely are areas that we should look into further.
Yeah, and I think we in carbon removal at this time shouldn't be dogmatic about this. Obviously, carbon utilization is not CDR. Doesn't mean that a carbon removal or a direct air capture company, for the sake of showing commercial traction, shouldn't look into it for the time being, because we've said the market is immature and these companies need to show commercial traction. So if you can sell your units to a greenhouse where there's a paying customer willing to buy a 50-ton per year unit off of you for cash in hand, yes, go ahead and do that. Yes, it's not carbon removal, but it allows you to have deployment in the real world that you can learn on and that you can show to others afterwards. So I think it's only sensible, and the founder would be making a mistake if they weren't looking at all the revenue streams they can tap into for the time being. Being very aware, though, of course, that this is not carbon removal.
Right. That's great.
One shout out to the Carbon to Value initiative. I put them as the answer on the Zoom chat, but yeah, check that out. It's a program that's like really focused on carbon utilization in particular. Since the question was kind of about what are the different things you can do. You can make a lot of different. You can make plastics. You can make fuels. You can make cement and concrete. You can make things for soil. You can improve ocean health. Like there's lots of things you can do with carbon dioxide.
Yeah. And Carbon to Value C2V is associated with NYU and is one of our partners at the Carbon Removal Challenge. So yeah, definitely check out Carbon to Value. I would put information in the can you put that link in the chat for everybody? Tito, that would be helpful since I'm doing this. All right, so we got a great question from Austin. He says, what is the one thing founders hide in their pitches that you wish they would just be honest about?
Maybe I would say not hide, but they overstate or overclaim where things are at or how far they actually can get to a given energy consumption or whatever it is that they're selling their tech for. And especially having come from industry, for me, it's clear where things are at. And when people put like targets that were a little too ambitious, then you lose credibility. So I think it's important to be fair with what you are. What is that potential? It's important to also highlight that you have a path to get to whatever, but being realistic of where things are at is important, especially if you have done some experiments and you know very well that you're far away from that target.
That's a great example. We see that also in the carbon removal challenge. We had one of our entrants said that they had a technology readiness level of 7 or something, and they basically just had a bucket that had some equipment in it. And so, I admired their bravado, but it was just kind of, clearly not objectively true.
I'll just jump in. I honestly, I don't think maybe I can name on one hand the number of times I've seen things like that. To answer the question, the thing that it goes back to what I said originally. The thing that I see that teams aren't honest about is they underplay the progress they've made. They don't talk about their LOIs. They don't talk about that a janitor at your school gave you $10,000 as your first investor. That's that's amazing. That's incredible credibility, right? Again, going back to they don't put the picture of their prototype. That is more often, almost every day, what I see is teams have made progress and they're just not sure how to claim it, or they don't think that it's progress because it's not shiny and all put together. That is the thing. When I really speak to teams about where I see that mismatch of that is get comfortable talking about what the latest thing that you've built is and the latest progress that you've had, and own that. It's freaking awesome. So that's the thing that I 100 times more often than in terms of there being a misalignment between kind of the reality and what the team is presenting. It is the super majority of the time it is that they are underplaying the progress they've actually made.
Great point, Tito. Thank you. All right, so we are at the end of our audience questions, and I'm gonna try to bring back the slide about our upcoming webinar. Just give me a second.
While you put your this slide, can I just ask if you had to do like one punchline for the students, what would it be? Like, one thing that they really need to remember and take out of this webinar.
Alternative revenue streams. It's not the most sexy one, but it's an important one.
Maybe for me, it's like thinking through your de-risking plan and making sure that it's sound.
Take credit for what you do have and don't worry about all the things you haven't done, because there's so many things you haven't done. It's totally fine. Take credit for the things you have done.
Thank you so much. Sue? So thank you again so much for the discussion. And just advertising, the next webinar will be March 17th, same time. So it's Buying Back the Future, hot tips from leading carbon removal buyers. So we're gonna have 4 amazing panelists. So we're gonna have Sophie Westover from REM, Michael Berger from Microsoft, Mitchell Selby from Shopify, and Alden Preston from MicWire. So don't miss it. It's gonna be really, really amazing as well. And yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you again.